Well, I've returned again for a third visit to Misson Carr. Quite a nice expansive view. I'm going to be trapping just inside the gate again, but I'm very early. I prefer to get here quite early, and then it gives me half an hour or an hour wandering around with the net first to see if I can find anything interesting that's flying around micro-wise. But another suitable evening. There's been spits and spots of rain on the way here, and I wouldn't be surprised if I don't get a few sort of light spatterings of rain during tonight's trapping session, but the conditions are otherwise very good. It's going to be overcast all night, at least as long as I'm here for, and the humidity level is apparently going to rise. There's some warm air coming through behind this rain, some very warm air, which is going to make for an uncomfortable and rather sticky night. So rather than be uncomfortable and sticky in bed, I'm going to be uncomfortable and sticky and probably mosquito ridden out here, but I don't mind that. I just had a walk in, the same as last time, but I don't want to go too far because the longhorn cattle are still at large, and I just wanted to have a quick check to see what sort of damage they've done. It's not extensive, but I would have liked the chance to have brought the car up here and trapped from further off to my left, but it's not practical. Neither is it practical to walk around, really. I don't want to get trapped by a herd of longhorns. They can outrun me, but at least on the plus side, the mosquito problem seems to have abated to a degree. I've only heard a couple that have come within close proximity, so we've certainly had progress there. It's just a case now of having a little wander around here, see if anything happens to fly by, and we'll see what it is, and just wait for the darkness to descend. Perfect conditions again. It always seems to take a long time to get dark. It does when you're waiting for it to get dark. The local corvids appear to be going off to roost, so maybe not got too long to wait. And once I've decided exactly where I'm going to set up, I'm toying with the idea of having the sheet draped over this gate. I quite enjoy it when I do that way. But do I drape it over this side or on the inside? It'll probably end up on the floor like always. Well, we're up and running. Just after a couple of minutes, just after 2200 hours, and it's the 27th of June, so it was a case of either trapping tonight or hoping that tomorrow night might be dry, but I looked at the forecast and I thought maybe tonight is the better of the two. And it certainly will be, I think, temperature wise and humidity wise, so we've got really good conditions. Again, there's a few more mosquitoes that have come out to play, and as the sky darkens over Misson Carr here, it's full of anticipation what we're going to get. See if we get any rarities come in. Should be another interesting session. You're not listening to the plane, you're listening to almost a whip-like call. That it's a quail, and it's calling in the field opposite where I'm trapping, and it's not far out. The male calls like that around late evening dusk. It's walked a few feet right from where it was, but that's something that you don't hear every day or every evening of every year. Well, now that we're getting towards the end of June and racing into the next month of July, commonest moths often at the trap are what's on the sheet here in good numbers, and these are the grass veneers or the crambids or the crambidae. There's a number of species, but don't be put off with them, because with a decent enough photograph or with one in a pot in front of you, it is possible quite easily to identify these. There's help on the website if you're new to micro moths or just venturing into micro moths, but you need to get to learn the crambidae because you're going to attract a lot of them, simple as that. And we have two species here so far. The majority, the larger ones, which are all up the sheet, up the back there and on the floor, is Chrysatutia colmella, and that is often the commonest species that you'll trap. The only other one that's in is a Griffula straminella, and they're small for a grass veneer or a crambid. Markings vary. Some individuals are better marked than others in all of the crambidae, but Chrysatutia colmella and a Griffula straminella are the two which are going to be dominating the next couple of weeks. So don't be frightened of your crambidae moths, your grass veneers. Well worth recording, because there are species, or several species, which are greatly affected by drought conditions, very dry, very hot conditions. But at the moment it looks as though Chrysatutia colmella has done quite well after last year's sun. It's interesting how the majority of the moths that are on the sheet, on the upright part of the sheet, are all walking up the sheet. Very few are settling down and then they'll come back down and drop on the sheet, but the number of grass veneers here, of which the majority are still Chrysatutia colmella, has increased. We've probably now easily got to 100 individuals. I'll try and have a quick count up at some time, but they will continue to come in. In terms of other moths, there's not a great deal. A V-pug has come in, and I'll probably have to put in a photo here because it's not playing at the moment, but V-pugs are very attractive. They're one of the green pugs that we have, and under MV light, green moths look even more green than what they are in daylight, and quite often you'll catch something like a green pug or other species of green moth that we have in the UK, and you'll take them home not waiting to be able to photograph them in the morning, get some really nice photos, and you find out in the end and in the bright light of day that the green coloration isn't that striking after all. But MV light does something to green coloration, it really shows it up. But an attractive moth anyway, and that looks like a carpet that's just fluttered in. But at the moment, as you can see, proceedings are dominated by Chrysatutia colmella, but a few other species are now starting to drop in, so it's time for a quick walk around the sheet. Well, it's been impossible to actually film anything, but this is a blackneck, and I don't think I've showed you one of these before. They rarely sit still long enough to warrant even attempting to film them. This is a moth that's done well the last few years, and it's spread and increased its range in Nottinghamshire over the years. It's a species usually of grassland, but it will turn up in odd situations, and I've had several of these at home, usually at odd singletons on occasional nights. But this isn't a moth to expect with any regularity if you run a trap from suburban or urban locations, but it is very likely to turn up. Quite an interesting moth. There's nothing really like it, certainly nothing that springs to mind. It can be something reminiscent of lesser yellow underwing, really, at a push, but those black marks are quite diagnostic, and it's a nice thing, but often very flighty. You will disturb this by day if you're walking through flower-rich grassland. This often will turn up and spring up from under your feet, but it's a nice one to get, and there's been several of these in. So that's blackneck. Not an everyday moth, that. Oh, we're an hour and a half into trapping here, and just look at this lot. It's a never-ending stream of crambids coming in. They come in, land close to the light, especially on that back sheet, and walk up to the top, and either fly off again and disperse or come back down to the bottom. But it's a never-ending march of Chrysatutia coolmella going up that sheet. I haven't seen anything like this for many, many years. In fact, this is the first time I've really seen this. We've had huge numbers of crambids to light before in Sherwood Forest, but we've never had the sheet up right over the gate like this when we've had such good numbers. It's quite something to see. But in terms of other moths, we've just reached 32 species, and I'm going around now and seeing what else has come in, but there's not a great deal of variation as yet, but there are some interesting bits and bobs in. I just don't know what they are, sorry. I need to take them home and to check them and photograph them, but there's a couple of moths that look especially interesting. I'm going to have a rummage through this enormous number of grass veneers. There's a lot more Agrifola straminella than I thought, but the majority are Chrysatutia coolmella. I had never seen the sheet like this, and you have to keep looking through these because the odd little goodie gets tucked away, lands on the sheet, and can get quickly disturbed. So you have to keep your wits about you and look for those gems amongst the coal of commoner moths, so to speak. Quite an extraordinary number of moths on the sheet and continually coming in. I'm trying to give you an inkling of how the moths are still coming in. Mostly the same species, but say there's the odd other moth that turns in occasionally in amongst this lot. There's a few that I've still got to put down, but you tend to forget about. It's quite easy to forget a moth as you're going around checking. Absolutely fantastic numbers, but there's very little for me to actually film. I think tonight it's more about the spectacle of the number of moths, to be honest. The good stuff will come in, there's no doubt about that, but on the whole there's not that many macro moths in amongst this lot. There's a few large yellow underwings in. Brown scallop is probably the most notable, to be honest. It's not a moth that I've trapped before, but there's been at least 3 in here, and the odd other stuff keeps turning up as well. There's a couple of clouded borders here and here. It may well be a case of me just inserting photos to illustrate the more unusual or spectacular moths, but just seeing this number of moths is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. On the downside, it's hard to get an accurate count or estimate of the number of Chrysotucha cormella and Agrifola straminella which are on this sheet. So you have to just generalise it and have a good guesstimate, so to speak. The real moths that I'm after are the more unusual ones that are tucked in amongst this lot. It's years since I've seen it. In fact, I don't think I have seen it anything like this. All we need now are some more macro moths to come in, and I'm sure they're going to come in. It's just marvellous to see this though. Absolutely fantastic. Well, not the most exciting of moths. In fact, this is probably as drab can be, but this is a brown scallop, and it's notable for its county rarity. This isn't a common moth, if I remember right offhand. But there's been a good number of these that have come in, and it's nice to see. Not the most spectacular moth though, but nice from a rarity point of view. So that's brown scallop, one which is finally settled down on the flat part of the sheet. Now here's a nice moth, a bit more colourful than the brown scallop I've just showed you, but this lovely straw coloured moth is a scalloped oak. Very easy to identify. There is nothing like this at all, and it's a quite attractive moth with those scalloped edges to the trailing edge of the wings. Very nice. Not a moth that I've ever trapped a great deal, actually. Only a handful of occasions. But always nice to see. Will turn up pretty much all over in any type of habitat eventually. But it's not a species that I've caught a great deal at home. Might have one record at home. So that's a scalloped oak. It's a lovely little thing. It's 12:30. And once you get after midnight, on good night, as any moth trapper will tell you, that's when your best moths tend to come in. We're still lacking a great deal of variety. Looking at the list, we're approaching about 50 species, which seems low for this number of moths. But once you get after midnight, or the witching hour, that's when oddities turn up, and quite often a sign it's real rarities make an appearance. That's why when you do get good nights, and you'll soon learn when you get good nights, you need to make the most of them. They don't always come around, even in favourable weather, good nights. And I know that maybe in a couple of nights, if I hadn't stopped longer, or I don't stop longer than I should tonight, I'll probably have regretted it. So, if you can, stay for as long as possible on those really good nights. This is really busy, but it's still slightly disappointing in terms of the number of species, but the number of species should start and increase now. Still, when I think back to like trapping in February or even March, you dream for a sheet being full of moths like this. So even though they're all common species, it's still nice to see such large numbers of common species. You don't get this lot in February so much. There's a closer view of the back sheet. There's a brimstone moth to the left of the screen. Plenty of grass veneers, mostly Chrysatutia cormella and Agrifola straminella, and that's it really. There's a few other bits. There's a blackneck just starting to work its way up through the middle of the sheet. That's gone again. It's all a case now of just looking for that something different that drops in. Well, that's a general scene. The moth-ridden sheet. I've actually trapped just on the outside of the gates. Generator inside. Next time I come, I will be trapping on the other side of the gate, or maybe even in the car park. I didn't expect this amount of moths tonight. I wasn't expecting anywhere near this kind of number. And the moths are continuing to come in, as they will do. This is the peak time now, as we get in the last few days of June and into July. This is the time you need to get that trap out if you can, and wherever you can. Well, here's a beautiful species. It's not very often I get a chance to show you a micro, but this is a fairly large tortrix called Epiblema phonella. Variously marked, but often has that horseshoe shape across the back of the body when the wings are folded up and the moth is at rest like this. But it is quite variable, and for a tortrix it is large. If I grubby finger time, there we are. It's a good sort of 15 mil from head to the end of the wings there. But it's a nice species, fairly widespread. You don't trap this more than a couple of times a year really. Well, I never do in the garden, so it's always nice to see, and one of the easiest of the micros to identify. It's a really lovely moth. I say quite variable, but the variations are pretty much along the lines of the same thing. It's just sort of ground colour that varies, and the intensity of the white in that sort of horseshoe shape. But it's a lovely micro moth. Don't be afraid of micro moths. Now here's another fairly easy to identify micro, another tortrix, and this is Eucosma campyliliana. Quite an attractive name to roll off the tongue. And it's a very attractive little tortrix, this. Beautiful, mostly white, with a few darker markings, but very nice indeed. And I'll put a photo in just to show you how nice these micro moths really are. There's some really well marked micros. They're beautiful little things, and every inch the equal of their larger cousins. So this is Eucosma campyliliana. It's a quite beautiful little thing. 1:15 in the morning now. I've hardly had time to drink my tea. As you can see, it's rather busy. It's quite unbelievable. Nothing really rare has dropped in as yet. It's mostly grass veneers. In terms of hawk moths, we've got elephant hawk moth, we've had eyed hawk moth in, and poplar hawk moths not long since dropped in. There's just so much to keep looking at and keep sifting through. There were 2 small micros which could have been the best things of the night, to be honest, but as I was about to pop them up, they got disturbed, both of them, and that's the last I've seen of them. They're here somewhere. Now look at this for an absolute beauty, and this is a burnished brass. It's a really attractive moth, fairly common, one that will turn up fairly regularly if you run a light trap even from home. But it's the metallic coloration of moths such as this. I can alter it, but just look how reflective those scales are. Truly beautiful things. I do like this species, and it'll occur fairly regularly in both its flight periods during the course of the year, in suburban gardens and even urban gardens. It's a lovely thing to have drop into your light. And this one has just plonked in, settled down, and that's it. I like moths like that. Now, this is another absolute beauty. This is one of the plumes, and the easiest of the plumes to identify. And this is the white plume moth, Pterophorus, with a silent P, pentadactyla. It's not a moth that I record regularly. It doesn't turn up every time I trap by any means, and I have gone years without seeing this moth. And it's more a moth of rural areas and woodland habitats than it is from urban gardens. That said, I have had it at home. It's a beautiful thing though, with the wings are like feathers. Absolutely beautiful. Quite incredible, the range of moths. Fabulous stuff. So that's the white plume moth, Pterophorus pentadactyla, or words to that effect. Cracking thing though, isn't it? As you can see on the sheet, it is still bedlam. Absolute bedlam. Moths still coming in all the time, of course. Cambids, the grass veneers still coming in, but there's an assortment of other moths now. There's a couple of brimstones, beautiful hook tips. Not a terrific range, although we're heading towards 70 odd species. Then I have got 1 or 2, or quite a lot of species to take back just to confirm the ID. So we're doing well. I still think something's going to drop in here, or suddenly appear on the sheet. It's an absolute cracking night, really is. It's alright, I'm just having 5 minutes with a cup of tea. It's great when nights are as busy as this one is. Sometimes you need to take 5 minutes out from the hectic nature of things 5 yards in front of me. So I'm having a cup of tea while I'm leant against the car. I dread to think what the numbers would have been like had we had normal sort of British summers for the last 2 years. Because even though we've got a lot of moths here, numbers are still well down on what there would be. And the only thing wrong with taking some time out and just sat here casually trying to enjoy the spectacle, of which it undoubtedly is. To me, this is absolutely something special. But when you sat this far away from the light, you almost instantly see something that you want to get up and pot up because it looks interesting. At least from here it looks interesting. But I'm going to finish my tea first. It's 1:45. Normally I will pack up at 2. That leaves the moths at least an hour's darkness to sort themselves out. So I'll give it at least another quarter of an hour. And then probably another quarter of an hour. We'll see what, or if anything, actually drops in. Anything really unusual, one of those moths that really sort of rounds the night off. Everybody likes a moth like that. And over the years, yes, I must admit, just before packing up, the best moth of the night has turned up many times. Will it do the same again tonight? Either way, it's been an absolutely fabulous trapping session. Especially if you like your grass veneers. Well, while there's still enough power in the phone, it's just gone 2 o'clock in the morning, and time I started packing up and had a quick check through all this lot. We have been joined by another eyed hawk. It's one of 2 this evening, but it may well be a couple of weeks before we see this amount of moths again. I'll be trapping Misson Carr a couple of times in July, and July is only a few days away. So, rather than the usual packing up shot, you can gawp at this lot.